Nicholas Wapshott is an author, journalist, and an online content consultant. He has earned a degree in politics from the University of York. A former senior editor at the Daily Beast, Mr. Wapshott has served as New York bureau chief and editor of the Saturday edition of the Times of London, business columnist for the Sunday Telegraph, and founding editor of the Times magazine. As political editor of The Observer, he covered Margaret Thatcher's final years in office. Mr. Wapshott appears regularly on CNN, MSNBC, PBS, and Fox News. He is the author of numerous books, including Thatcher, one of the first biographies of Margaret Thatcher; Peter O'Toole, a biography; Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, A Political Marriage; Carol Reed, a biography; and most recently, Keynes Hayek, The Clash That Defined Modern Economics. Please join me in welcoming our speaker, Nicholas Wapshott.
Good evening. It's very good to be here in Hillsdale, I must say. Hillsdale's reputation is enormous, but I had not guessed how beautiful it was going to be. What a lovely campus. You are so privileged. It's a great treat to be here, and particularly in such a strange week, as it's turned out. So this is sort of a perfect cap, as far as I'm concerned, on the end of, I think it's true for all of us, one of the most extraordinary weeks in our lifetimes, politically and, let's see, economically too. Here we are to talk about, first of all, I'm not sure who made up the title, but I'd like to thank them. I am asked endlessly to talk about Keynes and Hayek, and it took Hillsdale to say that I should talk about Hayek and Keynes. And that's entirely worthwhile. I have enormous admiration for Friedrich Hayek. Anybody who's looked at his long and extraordinary career will understand that he was a man of exceptional abilities. And mind you, I also have extraordinary time for John Maynard Keynes, which might not be shared with everybody in this room. But there's no doubt that John Maynard Keynes was an extraordinary person in terms of the history of the 20th century. Leaving Churchill aside, I don't think anyone except for Keynes did more to change the world. It might be good or bad, but he changed the world in a way that very few original thinkers did. And as a biographer, one of the reasons that I'm delighted with this story, apart from the fact that I'm a political economist, so this stuff has obsessed me forever, is that if you were to write the story of Einstein, you wouldn't be able to put him in a room with Isaac Newton. The big change, the big paradigm shift couldn't be done because the two people weren't there. But in this case, this is a fascinating story. This is a story about how John Maynard Keynes was on the brink of bringing forth his general theory, which would transform economics. It would invent, effectively, macroeconomics and totally change the relationship between governments and the economy and the people that they governed. And he was on the edge of this extraordinary paradigm shift in economics, and there was a late break when Friedrich Hayek from Austria came in order to say, before you get too deep into this, let me give you some warnings. And that was an extraordinary act of courage in a way, but it was also, of course, an act of career advancement. I don't think that anyone would doubt that Friedrich Hayek always had his eye on the main chance, and why not?
So, Nicholas, one of my favourite quotes from John Maynard Keynes is the one about how practical men are often slaves to some defunct economist. And you've written a book about two defunct economists, himself, Mr. Keynes, and Friedrich Hayek. Why do they matter today?
Well, it turns out that the great dividing line in terms of modern economics between whether you start interfering in an economy and try to manage it, and those people who said, don't do that because it'll only cause an enormous mess and we'll have to clear it up eventually, was 80 years ago when John Maynard Keynes, who was the most innovative economist of his day, and certainly the most influential economist of the 20th century, started working out theories which looked at the economy in a different way. Instead of looking at it as a series of business propositions, which traditionally is what economists did, he started looking at as if he'd hovered above economics and looked at it in what became known as macroeconomics. He looked at the big picture about the different elements, the different moving parts. And also, because he was talking at the end of the 20s, when Britain had suffered a great deal of unemployment, and at a time when, come 1929 and the subsequent collapse of the American economy, large-scale unemployment was a great problem. He was looking at it from a practical point of view. Is there anything we can do to the economy? Is there anything a government may do to an economy which might cure some of this terrible poverty, this terrible conditions of people not being able to find work for years on end? And as that was 80 years ago, but it turns out that this key division between whether you interfere or don't interfere in an economy turns out to be the principal political issue of this electoral cycle. In fact, it's been submerged for a very long time, not least because the Keynesians, when the Keynesians managed to succeed, enjoyed 30 years, I suppose, between 1945 and 1975, of intervening in the economy and managing it for the benefit of, well, let's say the population, but I mean, they made the economy bigger. Between 1975 and 2008, say, we had a different thing. We had a Friedmanite economy, a notion that Keynes was right in principles, but what you should do is to try to ration the amount of new money that you ease into an economy so that an economy wouldn't get out of kilter with itself.
It was the wedding of the century when Prince Charles married Diana Spencer. No one knew then that she would become the world's most sought-after icon. Glamorous, coquettish, living in a media frenzy, the Princess of Wales became every journalist's prey. Nicholas Wapshott, a well-known British newspaper editor and writer, sets the scene.
There's a great irony, of course, that Diana, Princess of Wales, is named after the goddess of hunting, because in the end she was tracked down by a posse of paparazzi. I don't think she knew that it was going to be her last affair, but she took up with Dodi, who was the son of Muhammad al-Fayed, the owner of Harrods, the department store. He was a playboy. We're talking about dozens of them. They're all on high-speed bikes. They've all got cameras that they can photograph with one hand as they're racing past a window of a car. She was very different from the group in which she grew up. The whole tradition of popular music, the rap style and so on, had been almost played out by the time she appeared on the scene. And I think that she came across something which was very distinct and different. This was an old, almost like a torch singer.